Hey everyone, welcome to another live recording of Trump's Trials and Tribulations, New York Trial Dispatch Edition. Today is May 14th, 2024, the second day of Michael Cohen's crucial testimony. I'm Roger Parloff, a senior editor at Lawfare, and I'm here with courts correspondent and legal fellow Anna Bauer, managing editor Tyler McBrien, and editor-in-chief Benjamin Wittes. Let's talk about the completion of the People's Direct Examination first. But before we do, Anna, you were in the courtroom. Quickly set the scene for us before that started.
Yeah, it was a busy day. I would say it's the busiest day yet. Tyler actually almost did not get into the courtroom because it was so busy. He was very lucky to make a mad dash from a few blocks over when one of the court officers gave him a call and said, "Oh, we have an extra space." So we were very lucky and glad that Tyler got into the room. Trump had a larger entourage than usual today. He had people like Vivek Ramaswamy, who is a potential VP candidate, Byron Donalds. Lara Trump was there for the first time, along with Eric Trump, who has been there a number of times. And then, of course, there were the usuals, people like Alina Habba and Boris Epstein.
And wasn't Speaker Johnson there?
Speaker Johnson, so this is actually interesting because the poll reports indicate that Speaker Johnson was there. I never saw him though, and he never, from what I could tell, came into the courtroom itself. So I guess that he was just there for a photo op and then left.
Smart move.
I did not see him in the courtroom. And then I also, some reporters, we were, looking at the poll reports from the hallway and saw that he was there. And then we were all looking intently to see if we could find him in the courtroom, but we did not see him. So it's possible that I missed him, but I know exactly what the guy looks like, and we were looking for him, and I did not spot him. However, someone I did spot that I think is worth noting as we talk about today is Grant Rood, who is a prosecutor with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. He has been working for some time on the Trump election interference racketeering case down in Fulton County. I kind of was walking by him and I spotted him and I did a double take, and I think he noticed that I did a double take. And then when I came back from the bathroom, I said, "Are you Grant?" And he said, "Sorry, I can't comment."
Okay.
But I know that it's him because I've seen him in person.
Also, if it weren't, he would say,
"Yeah, exactly."
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Can neither confirm nor deny.
But he was there sitting in the back taking notes. I did not see him after the lunch break, but people shuffled around, so it's possible that I missed him. As far as I'm aware, that's the first time that I've spotted any members of the Fulton County prosecution team, but it's possible that I've missed people in the past. But it is just interesting that they have someone there taking notes. They're thinking about, of course, how things are going to go in Fulton County. And I do know that there are, for example, members of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, when Trump was indicted in various places and had arraignments, when they were thinking about security situations, they sent people up to New York, for example, to kind of see how things go. So just an interesting note on someone who was there in the courtroom today.
Okay. And Ben, we actually spent more time on direct this morning than I was expecting. And of course, everyone was waiting for the cross. You remember the direct? Can you tell us some of the things that were established?
I remember the direct, but I actually want to start by saying that the direct finished very strong. And, the last impression that the jury is going to get is of Michael Cohen, at his most confident before you go to this cross, which we'll get to in a moment, really making clear that, why this was done, how this was done, at whose direction this was done. And I thought it was the most powerful part of the direct. She again walked him through 12 checks, which is boring as hell, but is actually critically important for the prosecution. 12 invoices. She really, I thought it was her strongest, Susan Hoffinger's strongest portion of the examination. She kind of walked him through, starting from the time of where we left off yesterday. Was it yesterday, 2 days ago, a month ago? I can't remember. Time all blends together. Which was at the decision to, do this reimbursement scheme. She walks him from that meeting through the execution of the reimbursement scheme, each time with was there any legal work? No. Was the word retainer, reflecting anything? No. Was it false? Yes. And, you repeat that 11 times, each for a different set of documents, and it becomes pretty powerful. So I actually thought, by the time we left for lunch, which was when the Cohen direct examination, and then she had a question at the end that I thought was kind of a real zinger, which was at whose direction and to whose benefit was this done for? And he says, Donald J. Trump. And of course, Trump is there in front of him pretending to be asleep the entire time. And so, you have this very demonstrative performance for the jury of, I don't give a shit what this guy says. I'm going to sleep through it. And so when we left for lunch, I think I actually said to Tyler, Tyler will correct me if I'm wrong or misremembering, that the prosecution has it all there if he can hold up under cross. It all depends on, of course, how he holds up under cross. See the next part of this conversation. But if you stopped the conversation at lunch, all the elements are there in my view. And I think the prosecution has really made its case, subject to, of course, the jury believing him, which is the job of the defense in the cross to make sure they don't.
I also, if I could just jump in, Roger, I want to dwell for a second on exactly how Susan Hoffinger left it with Michael Cohen at the very end, because I thought it actually echoed what if I recall correctly, the last question in Stormy Daniels' testimony. Recall that she had asked Stormy Daniels, was it a net positive or net negative, this entire saga with Trump? And she said, I thought very credibly negative. And I thought we got a similar sort of, looking back type of a question at the very end of the direct, which was whether or not Cohen regretted regretted doing things, regretted his past work and associations with Trump. And Cohen essentially said he doesn't regret working for the Trump organization. He still expressed that he did some very interesting work. He had great times, but eventually he was being asked to do things that he said violated my moral compass, and I suffered the penalty, as did my family. And I think that was exactly where we left it, which was quite an emotional watermark to leave it at.
And I just want to underline one thing. One of the things that Ben was talking about, him for whose benefit was this and at whose direction. He did plead guilty to. I mean, he described having pled guilty to in August 18th to a count of excessive campaign contribution, and so do we all feel that if the jury believes him at this point, all of the elements have been proven?
Well, so I think the dissenter on that point may be Anna, because we've gone back and forth about whether the prosecution has proven its case. I think, again, you can't stop now, because Todd Blanche gets another day to beat the crap out of Michael Cohen. And Cohen is critical on two essential points, without which it's much less obvious that you have the case. One is, did Trump order the first code red, which is pay off Stormy Daniels? And the second is, did Trump order the second code red, which is, create this falsification of record scheme to cover it up? If you don't believe those two things, you can make a credible argument, in my view, that he's not guilty, that maybe Alan Weisselberg cooked the whole thing up. But if you believe those two things, I think the government's proved its case. And I think it all comes down to those two things. Anna, I take it you are more skeptical on them, on the second one, than I am, being a pro-government shill.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I'm more skeptical. I just think that you can't take someone's guilty plea to something that happened before the allegedly falsified records as itself being intent that those falsified records were being used to cover up that crime. Like, that is what the elements of the crime require, that at the time that the records were falsified, there was an intent to use them to commit or conceal a second crime, which is the campaign finance violations or the election law or the tax stuff. And I just don't know. I mean, maybe the answer is the most logical that a jury will reach, which is that there's only this one reason why they would want to falsify these records, which is that there was a crime that was done and that they wanted to, make sure that it wasn't found out or whatever. But I just don't know that I have faith that they've shown enough of an intent to do that second crime at the time of the falsification itself, even if they've produced all this evidence of, those things maybe being crimes. Does that make sense, that distinction? Because I think that's what I am concerned about with what a jury of 12 people who have very different perspectives on the legal system. You have two lawyers who are maybe, going to have ideas about this. I don't know. I can't speak to the jurors and what they're thinking. But if you're a prosecutor and you're expecting to get a guilty verdict from this jury based on what they've shown so far about the intent for the step up, then I might be a little bit concerned. But I think that they've very much proven their case in terms of just the falsification itself, the misdemeanor charge.
I would just go so far as to say briefly that I think they've actually made an adequate case proving the intent to commit all three of the crimes. And, as we know, the jury doesn't have to be unanimous in their decision of which legal theory they bought the most.
Well, there might be an intent. But there's a distinction, right? That Trump may have had an intent at the time that he did. I think they've proven there was an intent to have this hush money scheme to, by unlawful means to impact the election. But what's important is not that at the time that those events occurred, he had that intent. What's important is that when the records were falsified, he wanted to use the records to cover up.
Yeah,
that's the distinction.
This brings me to the fundamental point, which is we haven't actually talked a lot about Justice Merchan, but we're going to learn a lot about him when he issues his jury instructions. And a huge amount of this case actually depends on his jury instructions on this point, because I can write perfectly defensible jury instructions that will guarantee you, within a certain margin of error, or a conviction. I can also write you certain jury instructions that will guarantee you a long jury deliberation and maybe a holdout. I can't write you a jury instruction that's going to get you an acquittal, but you can really get, a lot depends on how he writes, how he instructs the jury as to the step up offense. And also how well, of course, the further cross goes, which we should turn to now, but but importantly, the closing arguments, where particularly on the prosecution side, you're going to really try to put this all together.
Well, and I just want to say too, in my own thinking, what's informing this is the absence of Weisselberg, which is, I think, something that, because I'm not thinking about this from how I would deliberate as a juror. I'm thinking of it from, what are many 12 different people with maybe different thinking, what could they be mulling at this time? And I do think that the absence of Weisselberg is something that, in addition to maybe the prosecution only having circumstantial evidence of Trump's intent for the step up, then also in addition to that, having the big question mark around the absence of Weisselberg, it's just something that maybe I feel a little bit less confident about than other people will, and that's fine. And I'm happy to, we'll debate at a later time after we talk about the cross if we have time, but that's just kind of two of the things that are going into my thinking right now.
Okay. Tyler, do you want to start us off on the cross?
Sure. Yeah. I'm happy to go first since that's the exciting part, the beginning of it. When Todd Blanche stepped up to the podium, I think it's fair to say that he came out swinging. He immediately sort of had this, I don't know, this edge to his voice, which sounded a bit different from what we usually hear from him. He said, "Mr. Cohen, my name is Todd Blanche." He clarified that they've never met, but he said, "But you know me, right? You know my name, right? You went on TikTok and called me a crying little shit." And he came right at him, and I could feel the entire press gallery just sort of like lean forward in their seats. I could almost hear them rubbing their hands together. It was people were blowing chef's kisses in the air. It was
downhill after that.
There was a lot of venom in his voice, I will say. It's hard to
There was, yeah.
Yeah.
It was an edge that I don't think I've heard yet so far in the trial. And Cohen spit it right back at him. I think, he said he was giving answers like, sounds like something I would say. And that actually continued throughout the cross, much to Blanche's frustration. He's almost refused to give yes or no answers the entire time. He said, "Sounds like something I would say. I suppose so." I might believe that to be true. These strange formulations to just, I don't know, designed maybe to infuriate Blanche. But as Ben just said, that was I think the high dramatic watermark of the day. The very beginning, there was an objection which was sustained. I believe, there was another quick back and forth, and then there was a sidebar. And after the sidebar, we settled into this very confusing sort of ambling cross from Blanche that it was very hard to follow the strands of. He was jumping around in time a lot. I was walking back from the courthouse with Anna, and I was trying to parse even what the major themes were. And I can't imagine myself in the jury's position trying to pull out those strands. The few that I could possibly see, and I'm curious Ben and Anna's view of these, is that same thing with Stormy Daniels. Cohen is vindictive. He's money driven. He's bent on revenge. It's literally the name of one of his books. That one of the line of questioning seemed to suggest that he was doing what he was doing so that he could reduce his prison sentence, which fair enough. I think Todd Blanche at one point said, which is fair, because who wants to stay in prison any longer than they have to? But the overall impression that I came away with was confusion. But I'm curious about Ben and Anna's take.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it wasn't so much there wasn't a theme. There were two clear themes. One is Michael Cohen is a liar, except when he was saying nice things about Donald Trump back in the day. And then also that Michael Cohen is motivated in some way to testify the way that he has against Donald Trump, either because he hates Donald Trump or because he's motivated by money, or because he was motivated at one point in time by getting his sentence reduced. So he wanted to cooperate with prosecutors. So the whole thing is just going to his motives as well. But Tyler, I'm in complete agreement with you, as you know, that it was very disorganized. did not strike me as a good start to the cross-examination. He has a whole day tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. But
Not tomorrow, Thursday.
or excuse me, Thursday. He wasn't following like the basic trial advocacy rules of cross, which is one fact per question, have like clear chapters to your, you have a point that you're making. You don't actually even have to get to that final question of being like, and so you're doing all this because you want to make money. All you've got to do is just get the facts out that show that Michael Cohen, was making money off of his books, whatever. And he got some of those facts out, but he was doing it in a way that was so disorganized, very kind of fumbling. It was really not pleasant to listen to or to really even understand. It was just really jumbled and really not a great start to the cross-examination.
Yeah, I want to outflank both of my colleagues here and say that this was look, he's got another day to do it, but if it continues at this level, it will be a disaster of a cross. And the defense made a terrible mistake by letting Blanche do this rather than letting Emile Bovie do it. Bovie is a pro. He's shown in several crosses that he really has a knack for this. And Blanche comes off as whiny under the best of circumstances. He comes off in this instance as hectoring and as having sort of an instinct for the capillaries with Cohen. He's obsessed for like a full hour of this conversation with showing that Cohen, I don't even quite know what the point of this was, that Cohen was trying to use cooperation with the DA to get his federal sentence reduced, which, duh, that's what convicts do. And he never quite landed the punch either. And so I think it was a genuinely bad performance. And I say this like the defense's performance in this case has been erratic. It has ranged from, quite brilliant in my view in the case of Bovie and David Pecker and Bovie and Hope Hicks, which were real, like quite apart from anything else, quite apart from how you feel about the case, real things of beauty to watch as a matter of trial advocacy.
Susan Necklace's first day was
quite good. Her second day was kind of a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the most important cross. And frankly, they have the least adept. I mean, Blanche did a decent job with opening arguments. But he's much less of a good questioner. He sounds, pardon me, this is going to sound prejudicial. He sounds like a frat boy with an axe to grind, and it's annoying. And I think he landed a few blows that a more skilled advocate would have landed more quickly and more gracefully. And he spent a lot of time just boring everybody. And if I were the jury, I would be pretty tuned out by this point. It's always a mistake to impute your reactions to that of the jury, but I was pretty tuned out by this point, and I nodded off a few times.
Were you about to say something, Anna? No? No, okay. Because I just, I wasn't there, but reading your tweets, starting out even with, you called me a crying little shit on TikTok, seems a little personal and whiny and thin-skinned and beside the point.
And it raises the question, which is a question we've come back to a number of times on these dispatches, is how much of this is what your client wants you to do versus how much of this is what your advocacy strategy would be if you didn't have a client who is the former president of the United States and is probably the worst client in the world to work for. So I mean, I don't know if people have thoughts on that, but somehow Emil Bovi's managed to get by just fine without, having to deal with how maybe that would impact his cross examinations, because his crosses have been, although there's been times when I think he's done some things that maybe he could have not done, but he still overall has just been really an incredible advocate in that regard. So it's just interesting to see the level of differences between the advocates within Trump's team.
I want to put on the table one other factor in addition to Blanche's poor performance, is I think Cohen had a fairly strong performance. I think he really threw a spanner in the works with a lot of Blanche's questions, even factual questions. He frustrated the rhythm and the flow by giving these strange answers and saying, I believe this to be true, and getting into these little sparring matches with Blanche, which I don't think, Blanche came out looking good of that. I don't think Cohen came out looking that good either, but he really he also didn't allow Blanche to settle in. Who's to say if Blanche would have settled in, but I don't think, I think a factor that we should also consider is how well Cohen, withstood this cross.
I think that's exactly right. And, one of the things that you see here is that we think of Cohen as this weird pugilistic, Long Island, kind of boxer / rube, but he actually revealed himself as a fairly sophisticated lawyer, who, he may be a criminal, but he knows his way around a courtroom brawl. And he knows how to, parry and not wilt under aggressive questioning, slow things down. He knows how to not let the lawyer get into a flow of questions. And isn't it true that blah, blah, blah? Well, I'm not sure I would say that, and just sort of interrupt the flow. And he did a very nice job of that in a very self-studied and deliberate fashion. And I was actually more impressed with Cohen than I expected to be.
Yeah, I kind of actually had a different view of it. I mean, I didn't think he performed poorly on cross. I thought he still came across as, it's not like he flipped us. There are some witnesses who you watch and they kind of flip a switch and you have a completely different view of them after the cross. I don't think it was that. And I don't think that it's like anything. I mean, if anything's catastrophic, it's how this cross is going for the defense. Although, of course, we'll see what happens tomorrow. But I think that it's nothing that is too harmful for the prosecution. But I thought that some of his Weasley answers were just so
well, he is a Weasley.
I know, but there were just certain things that I think he really was just trying to be a little bit too weasel wordy about it. And he could have just been straightforward and it would have been fine. It would have been not have been too damaging. So
I actually agree with that. But I do think that in terms of just interrupting Blanche's flow, he really threw him off his game. And he didn't give him, Blanche never grabbed control of the situation and ran with it. And part of the reason is that Cohen was being an asshole.
Well, yeah. Well, and also one thing he didn't do that I think maybe Blanche wanted him to do is get hot-headed. Even when he was trying to kind of trip Blanche up a little bit and slow him down, interrupt his flow, he wasn't like getting hot-headed. He wasn't
Right.
saying, yeah, I hate your client and I want him to, go to jail and die. And he did say, it sounds like something I might say and blah, blah, blah. But he kind of was just very measured about it, very
Yep.
matter of fact. And that was, I think, something that he did very well.
And one of the other things that he did that I thought was interesting was that, when confronted with these numerous bileful things that he says either on TikTok or social media, he doesn't deny any of them. He basically projects yeah, that's how I feel about it. Here's your merch that shows him in jail. Well, that's kind of what I think. And I think if you're, again, I don't want to impute my views to the jury, but I was like, but my reaction to it was, oh, I'd actually rather see him own it than see him, try to run away from it and pretend, as Stormy Daniels did sometimes, that that's some other company doing it, like put distance between her and it. It's like the Trump in jail shirt. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. And there was something kind of refreshing about it.
Yeah, and to Anna's last point about his emotion or lack thereof, I think yesterday, as is today, most of the time he was very neutral, very even keeled. And the times when emotions did bubble to the surface, they weren't anger, it wasn't fire breathing. It was this residual sadness and betrayal I sensed, from the great betrayal of his life and how it affected him and his family. And that's exactly how he left it on direct.
Before we go, I want to ask Ben about something else. It looks like this may be the only Trump trial to go to trial before the election, and there's really only an outside chance the criminal prosecution of Trump relating to January 6th will get to trial before the election. I understand Lawfare has another podcast relating to more successful efforts to seek criminal accountability for January 6th. Do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, so within the last week, we have finished season 2 of The Aftermath. And if this is your introduction to Lawfare work on post-January 6th Trump accountability issues, I want to recommend that you go find The Aftermath on whatever podcast catchers you use. It was hosted by our colleague, Natalie Orpit. The last episode features such important voices as Roger Parloff. It's an incredible series. It's two full seasons of discussion of the many ways in which different parts of our system have sought accountability for January 6th and the post-election period. I think it is genuinely unlike anything else that's out there in its narrative richness and diversity of sources and the coverage that it includes, the subject matters that it includes, everything from the second impeachment to congressional hearings to the January 6th committee to criminal cases. It's really a remarkable piece of work, and you should go find it. It's on the Lawfare Presents feed. Lawfare Presents The Aftermath, and I promise you, if you listen to one episode, you will listen to more of them.
Well, we will leave it there. Anna Bauer, Tyler McBrien, Benjamin Wittes, thank you for joining us. And thank you all for watching. If you want to support Lawfare's coverage of the Trump trials and watch this dispatch without ads, become a Lawfare material supporter at lawfaremedia.org/support. See you Thursday for the next New York trial dispatch, and tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the full-fledged Trump trials and tribulations, discussing the status of